Okay, this screencast is going to go over steps 12 through 14 for the guided project 8-3. So what we were going to do is we're going to click on the dental insurance tab and we want to make a pivot table. And remember we talked about pivot tables help us by looking at data that we have in a table right now. You know, as an example, this patient ID, it lists the insurance they have, the kind of services they received, the maximum benefits, and how much they were billed. And we want to maybe look just a little more closely at the billings for different types of services. So what it has us do is highlight cells A4 through E35 on this dental insurance worksheet, and I'm on step 12A. So I'm going to highlight that, dragging down the range. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under the Insert menu here at the top, and I'm going to select the Recommended Pivot Table button here on the left. And then it wants me, according to step number C, to click on the Sum of Bills by Service Code. So we're going to click OK, and or click on the select that second pivot table option, Sum of Billed by Service Code, and this is what it creates for us. So here's a few service codes listed on the left. Looks like they're looking at particularly like 4 or 5 different options, 5 in total, and how much has been billed for each of these different types of services. So it could be anything from root canals to a simple cavity repair, etc. And these codes insurance companies use so that they know what generally in the area is a normal charge for a service, so they can compare what this particular dentist is charging and then pay accordingly. So looking over here in the pivot table fields, we see that in the rows we have the service codes down here, and in the values section we are looking at the sum of the bills charged for each service, and that's over here. So what the instructions want us to do is add a second field to this table, because we're going to kind of look at the numbers just a little bit differently. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on Build here in the list of field options, and we're going to drag it down to the Values section. So we now have Sum of Billed and Sum of Billed to. So basically they're showing the exact same information, or values. So we want to differentiate them a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on here, the heading for Sum of Billed, and then we're going to click on this Field Setting buttons at the top. And it wants us, according to step number 13A, change this to Total Billed. Okay, so we're going to change the name of it. And then we're also going to change the number format to a currency format and make the decimals 0. So we're going to click that down to 0. And then we're going to click OK and OK again. Okay, so now this is called the Total Billed column. It's the same values as before, but we've just changed the title and we've added currency. So we know for this service, this was the total amount billed. For this service, this was the total amount billed, etc. So we want to differentiate this other column. So what we're going to do is we're going to right-click now on this Sum of Billed to, and we're going to select the Value Field Settings. It's the same little thing we brought up before, just clicking on the Field Setting button at the top. This just shows us another way that we can access that Value Field Settings command. So the custom name for this one is going to be Average Billed. So again, what the insurance company will want to do is compare the total billed by a particular dentist. Okay, let's see if I can spell average, by the average billings, and just see what the difference is. Look at it a little more closely. So what we need to do then, because we're looking at an average, we're going to click the average option. And notice when I do that, it changes the title again. So you're going to have to do it one more time. because you will be marked down if it has that of in there and it's not exactly right. So we'll change it again to average build. And then what we're going to do is change that number format also to currency 0. And then click OK again. Okay, so now you can see this is the total build for this particular service, and each bill sent out, the average for each bill was about $198. And you can see that the pivot table shows us, when we break it down, that even though this particular service was billed quite a bit, its average billing was not too much different than the other services. It shows us that this is a service that is performed more frequently. Whereas look at this little service, the total bill and the average bill are the same, which shows that this service was provided once, but it was an expensive service in comparison to the other services provided. So again, here's an example of what pivot tables can do for us in taking basically numbers on a table and breaking them down to look at them a little more closely and answer the questions that we have. Okay, to finish out with step number 14, we're going to apply some styling to our pivot table. And we're going to do that by going under the Pivot Tools options here and then click on the Design tab. And what we're looking for is the Pivot Style Medium 6. So if you expand the options out here, you'll see there's a light section and a medium section. And so you want to go to the number 6 option, and just to double check that you have the right one, hold it there for a minute and it will give you a little tag to identify it. And then what we're going to do now is add some banding, which you take note might be a nice way to format your pivot table when you do the final project. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to click on banded rows and banded columns, and that adds some nice border look, bordering to the pivot table. And then I'm going to click on the Grand Total button here at the top, and I'm going to click off for rows and columns. Okay, so it took a grand total off here. So we just have a simple table that's just looking exclusively at the total build for each of these services and then the average build per each service. Okay, then you can go ahead with steps 15 and 16 and adding a heading and a subheading, and then format those both in step 17.